if I can find a way to support myself through my passion, through love, like that is the most beautiful thing. That is success to me. And constantly, obviously, something else that's really important is to surround myself with people who inspire me to be better, people who I think are talented, who push me to grow, people who love me. Those things are super important to me too. So I think, success, like I think there's a lot of things that come into that, into what success means to me. But yeah, generally that's what success is for me, I think.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam. On each episode of Oh My Curry Goodness, I talk to individuals, primarily those who are Gen Z, from across different industries about their stories and the experiences that have shaped them into who they are today. I created Oh My Curry Goodness because I really want to know more about the behind the scenes part of a person as opposed to focusing on the final destination or their highlight reels. And I really think these are important because it helps us understand what it means to be, at the end of the day, a human being. Because these stories and behind the scenes are some of the few things that make us human beings. And so I really want to have these conversations so that we understand that there's a story. Yes, we can, human beings are capable of doing really incredible things, and we've seen that in the past. But let's talk about their journey, and let's talk more importantly about the good and bad experiences. And so I hope that you guys as listeners join me in continuing to have these behind the scenes conversations, because at the end of the day, we are all human beings with unique stories. So continue to check back each and every week to learn from incredible people, primarily of those who are Gen Z. Although at some point in the future, I'll make sure to reach out to different generations. Now, this week, I'm speaking with Pierangela, who is a musician and artist who hopes to inspire others to look within through her work and creativity. And I've interacted with many artists and musicians, and it's really interesting to learn about their perspective when it comes to making an impact. Because while many people might just see them as entertainment, those who are involved in that space see it not just as entertainment, but as a way to inspire people and as a way to make an impact. So I'm really looking forward to having a great conversation and connecting with a musician and artist. So Pierangela, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness. I hope I pronounced your name right because it's a great name, but I was like, I hope I didn't mess it up.
Hi, Hamza. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. We've been talking about this for like a year now, so it's kind of crazy. I remember you reached out to me in early August of 2023, and I remember being so excited. And I'm just so grateful that things aligned the way that they did, because I actually think that now more than ever is the perfect time for me to be able to have this conversation with you. So hi, everyone. My name is Pierangela. I am an artist and musician from Miami Beach, Florida. And I'm really excited to delve into, what it's like to be in this space, and really what my goal is with my passions.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. And by the way, I just want to remind you again, you have a great name. Uh,
Thank you.
you just really do. And I hope I did pronounce it right because, my name is Hamza, but I've been called Hazmat. I've been called Hamza, which I understand. One time I was called Asthma, so not really sure where that came from. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, you have a really great name. I don't know if that's something that people have ever struggled with because I'm thinking it's either Pure Angela or I'm thinking, Pure Angela as two separate words. So
I know
yeah.
you can call, if it's easier, you can totally call me Piera, which is what everybody calls me. And I think it's probably a lot easier than saying Pierangela all the time. Like I definitely don't go by my full name all the time, but it is my artist name simply because I feel like it is, the most authentic way to describe myself. But you can call me Piera.
Hey, either way, it's great. Before before we go into your personal story and your journey as a musician and artist, I do want to know, I want to start off easy, which is that tell me a song or a painting or maybe even both that you feel like has meant a lot to you because when it comes to learning from musicians and artists, yes, they want to pursue their work, but there's always that, I guess, if we're going to use car analogies, it's like that thing that kind of starts your engine or starts like everything, which, well, not everything, but like it definitely starts the car or your personal car in any way. So is there a song or a painting that you kind of grew up before you kind of dived into your personal journey where you're like, wow, I remember this and I really want to do something like this at some point?
Well, I feel like being an artist, it was so innate to me. Like, and when I say artist, I just want to like clarify, I really do mean like all forms of art. Like for me, I feel like artist encapsulates that, all that I do. So I knew from the time that I was able to like, create a thought or like hold a pencil, like I knew that this was the life that I was going to go into. Like there was no question about that for me. So I feel like it was something that I just naturally always knew was going to happen. It wasn't like I saw certain artists and then felt like, oh, like that's what I want to do. um but as I started, delving into my songwriting journey, which is where I really started to take things a little bit more seriously and realize that I had more ownership over creation than I thought I did. Because before I was in an R&B cover band. And so I think that's, I was like, oh, well, I love singing and stuff. But once I started writing music and making art with intention, I think that's when I realized like, oh, wow, like, let me like, pay more attention to what's around me. But around that time, I was listening to a lot of like Frank Ocean, and I just thought it was so interesting that he was able to kind of like orchestrate albums that were so concise, and the thoughts that were shared in those albums were, I don't know, they were so clear and specific, and the analogies, it was also personal to him, and yet we were as an audience able to understand what it was that he was trying to say. But because you had sent me the questions over text, so I was looking over them, and this one really stuck with me. I was thinking about it all day. Like, I feel like a song that continues to stick with me till this day is a song called "You" by Kendrick Lamar. And it's basically a song in which he speaks to himself in the second person perspective. So he's saying, like, loving you is complicated, but he's talking to himself. And it's really interesting because throughout this song, he is discussing imposter syndrome and feelings of, like, you know, of unworthiness, of feeling like he wasn't able to fulfill his purpose, that he doesn't like himself, that he even, like on a more serious note, that he wants to end his life because he feels like his existence isn't like enough. And it's so interesting because you'd look at somebody like Kendrick Lamar and you would think that he has it all. I mean, like, he is literally probably one of the best rappers alive. He's been able to transform so many people's lives, and like he's very wealthy and has a lot of recognition. But it just goes to show that artists who have, not even forget artists, people who have success, they're also just people. And we all deal with feelings of inadequacy. And I think that listening to that song, the way that it is phrased and the way that it's you listen to it and it sounds like he's like talking to a mirror, you know what I mean? And I just think that was so profound. Every time I listen to that song I cry, but I feel like that is what I want to do with my music. Is like I feel like I owe it to my purpose to always be as honest as I can be about you know about my experience as a person, because I don't think enough people are authentic about what it's really like to struggle with things, and to like to be doing things and look great on the outside, but then internally be going through things. Like I want to be able to inspire people with my authenticity in that regard.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that because, it's again, like Kendrick Lamar is an incredible artist and he's one of the most widely known. But then, like you mentioned, how there is the human being or the human part where it's like when I say human, I mean like the struggle and the challenges. And these are important because unfortunately, like I mentioned, how in the introduction, where it's so easy to look at the person and go, oh, they got it, everything figured out, which
Yeah.
they're doing great, but they had a journey to get to where they are today. And so, yeah, I feel like music and art in particular. I mean, I know people often, unfortunately, talk down on it in terms of like, oh, you can't make there's no significance in it. But like music and art have a form of storytelling, and you're able to look at their story through art or music and go, this is what their life looked like. And
Yeah.
it may not make sense to you, but the whole point of human beings is that we are, and this is not a way to like berate people, but it's like human beings are confusing, but that's what makes them unique. You don't understand their experience. So like based on what they are presenting or based on what type of work that they're presenting, let's try to understand what it is that they're trying to show, because there's a very good chance that their perspective on life or how they grew up is vastly different from how you grew up. So like you and I, we grew up in different places, but when I see the work that you do, I may not understand all of it, but that's because I don't resonate with you. And wait, no, not I don't resonate with you, but it's because I don't know the kind of life you've had. And so rather than bashing or being judgmental, let's try to understand. And hopefully by doing that, we can take that step to bringing people together and understanding that regardless of what stories people have, that they're human beings at the end of the day.
For sure. And I think, well, okay, so it's really interesting that I understand, like, so I don't come from a family of artists at all. This is kind of something that, just that is just kind of my thing. I had to figure out my own way around this industry because I didn't really have anybody in my family to look up to in that regard. My dad's an engineer. My mom works in marketing, but my dad specifically, he is of that belief that it's like, I don't really understand the arts. Like, what is the purpose of the arts? But if you really look at society, especially music, like music is probably one of the biggest vessels of social change that we have today. I mean, music kind of drives a lot of things. Most people do listen to music, and for example, like music drives a lot of like trends. So you could see, like, for example, like if you've heard like Sabrina Carpenter's Espresso, right? That song and the aesthetics of the music video and the aesthetics of her character have molded a lot of the trends that came out this summer that people are following, simply because, that's what music does to people. It makes them feel a certain way. So it's our goal as artists, like, you may not understand my story, but it's my job as an artist to make my music or my art, I don't know, it's my job to be able to translate my emotions clearly enough so that people can resonate with it, because ultimately, I think resonating with music is like, a form of empathy. It's a form of connecting. So it's like, I don't know Kendrick Lamar, but I listen to his music and I empathize with what he's saying. And so it's just about, like, finding artists that you connect to. And I think that that is what transforms many people's lives. That's why people turn to music when they're feeling emotional or when they need to be uplifted. It really does help us as people to connect to others and also to connect to ourselves. So yeah, it's really all about figuring out what's the best way to relay those messages as artists. But yeah, music is pretty damn important, I would say. Music is it's $1 billion industry. And I think, like, going, because I study at Berkeley in Boston, I study audio engineering, which is crazy because it's like, seeing the other side of how music is produced and how much work goes into everything. It's pretty crazy to see just the attention to detail that goes into every song that's released, but also just like music business. The whole industry is so important to the way that, like, even like aspects of the economy work. So it's really interesting, and I think a lot of people don't realize that.
For sure. And, I'm really glad that you're able to. I feel like a part of me was kind of struggling on how to like convey the message on how important music and art is. So thank you so much for sharing that, because like like you said, like you don't know who Kendrick Lamar is, but you can relate or empathize with me with his story. And I think that's what I always try to emphasize. That's what actually what I was trying to say, but I didn't know how to say it. So I really appreciate you for sharing it, which is the fact that we have to create that sense of relatability, because we may be two different human beings, but there's always something we can relate to where we go, oh, I can relate to this because I went through this or I'm currently going through this. And so having that relatability makes you realize how much we human beings can have in common. So I don't know why I decided to go philosophical, but that was so cool. So
No, no, I love it. That's what I'm all about. So I love it.
I want to transit. So I want to now talk about your personal journey. And one of the things that really stuck out, because I was stalking your website, um, which is that so your parents grew up or came to the United States from Venezuela at a time where there were a lot of political tension, or there was a lot of political tension around that time.
Yeah.
And for them, I mean, and I can relate. Parents' story is similar to yours in the sense that a little bit in the sense that my dad came from Bangladesh to the United
Mm,
States and he studied here, and it was very difficult for him because he's growing up, or he was there for college, but there were a lot of challenges from like schoolwork, the fact that he's growing up in a different environment. the language, because in Bangladesh they speak Bengali, and then the United States we
Mm.
mostly speak English. So there's that, and then there's also there are people that might not be kind to people who are moving into who are coming to the country. You'll always have those people that are like saying really mean things to immigrants. And so the reason why I say that is for them, obviously, that the concept of home is difficult, but I want to focus on, I guess, your home in the sense, which is that I don't know if you grew up in the United States or if you were born in Venezuela. Well, actually, before we talk about that, I am curious now because I don't know if you were born in Venezuela or you're.
Oh, no, I was born in Miami, born and raised in Miami. I lived in Venezuela for about a year, and I'm very like culturally connected to Venezuela, but I've lived here my whole life.
Okay, perfect. Okay, because I was like, okay, I know you were from Miami. I just want to make sure. But
Yeah.
I want to know how you knew. And one of the questions I usually ask my guests is like when they're pursuing their passions, is like how they knew that this was the right decision for them because we don't usually know what the future looks like for well, for any of us. So when it comes to your purpose and the fact that you're involved in music and art or visual arts, how did you know that was the right home for you? Because this is an industry that can impact a lot of people. It's a $1 billion industry, but it's also an industry where there it can be dangerous in the sense where it's like it almost feels like you're in survival mode sometimes. So
Yeah.
like how did you know that this industry or this field was the right home for you personally?
Well, okay, so it's funny because I feel like I kind of got to a point in my life where I eventually had to make a choice on whether I wanted to choose to be, primarily a musician or an artist, which I did choose music. That's like music is the love of my life. And art will, as much as I love art, art will always, come after that. But for me, it was kind of like I felt like I didn't have any other choice. Not in the sense that I wasn't capable of doing other things. I knew that I was born to do this. Like I just always knew there was no other. It was a no-brainer for me that this was going to work out for me because I just knew that I just had faith. I guess I had innately. I was good at it. I had like I was just naturally creative. And so this was the thing that worked for me, you know what I mean? But beyond that, I just felt like wow, like I really want to be able to share like love through art with the world. Like that's what I want to do. And so, as unrealistic as that may sound, because let me tell you, it's not an easy industry to succeed in. I remember, being in elementary school, and I remember there was a teacher who told me, "Well, you can't be a singer, you can't be an artist. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you have to pay attention in math class." Because I'd always be doodling in my class. Because I honestly, I didn't care. I didn't care. Even until like I was just talking the other day about grades and high school and stuff. I went to an arts high school, but everybody was straight A students. I mean, these kids were so bright. I was like, guys, like we're here for art. Like, oh, you guys are so smart. And I'm like, I didn't care, and it wasn't important to me. And I think that it's just because like I knew what I wanted to focus on, and so I devoted a lot of time to that. But anyways, going back to elementary school, and this teacher had told me that I wouldn't be able, like, she was like, yeah, you're not going to be able to succeed in those careers. That's completely unrealistic. I started to think, like, I guess I could be a comedian, but that's still not, I'm not even that funny. And also, it's just like, like, that's still not, like, that's still kind of not realistic. So I thought about it and I was like, okay, maybe I can become like an accountant or a doctor. But again, it's like, I didn't want to do anything that sounded, you know, it just wasn't for me. I knew I was meant to do this. It's really as simple as that. And it's so funny because the more I honored my truth in wanting to be an artist full time, the more life has opened itself up to me. And I've gotten so many opportunities. I've been able to see a lot of success and like at a young age because I chose to honor what I really wanted to do. So it was kind of just something that I was born with. I just knew I was going to do it. I'm sorry, I rambled, but yeah.
No, that's great. And part of me was about to burst out laughing when you were debating about being an accountant because here's the thing. I took Introduction to Accounting for one of my courses. I go to Ohio State and I
Yeah.
took Accounting 1 and Accounting 2. Those two classes were a nightmare for me. So much math, so much calculation, and accounting is one of those classes that is like you need to be very careful because one bad formula can ruin your entire answer. So I was like, well, if you really want to do accounting, I hope you're like one of those like detail oriented people. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but okay, I mean, that works for you. That works for you.
Hey,
But
I don't even know where like I don't it was just like honestly just throwing ideas out there because I was like I was not sure what to do. But yeah, it's funny. I'm very I am extremely detail oriented for things that I care about. I don't care about math all that much. So it's like okay, like that that wouldn't have worked.
no, I can relate to you in the sense that I'm a computer science major, which was something that took me a while to fully say because at the time I was like, I don't know. I mean, I looked at my dad's computer screen and I'm like, what is all this? But then once I got to do it on my own, I was like, oh, maybe this is not as bad as I thought. But I also have this weird curiosity in learning about people's stories. And then if you were to ask some of my parents' friends, they'll say that Hamza is a very outgoing person. So I feel like the best way to kind of use my curiosity of people and also being outgoing is the form of podcasting. But then similar to music and artistry or in artistry, which is that these are both like these fields are risky at times because there's so many of them. And so I feel like it's such a it's such a weird question. It's a weird answer at times, like saying like you're obsessed because there are so many people that may have the same answer, but I feel like it's just one of those things where like yeah, there's so many of them, but there's not another Hamza Islam. Well, actually there is, but like that's not the point. But
But they're
there,
not you.
yeah, there's no like there's not another me in the sense that there's not another you. So it's one of those things where yeah, I love computer science, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure that there may be a field that you're interested in, but there's also another part where you're like there's nothing there's like this weird obsession, and I want to say weird obsession in the sense that it's actually a good thing where it's like you're just like it's just you. Like you're able to like it's like when you not vomit, but it's like you're just it's just like you want to share your passions with the world, which I know is the actual slogan for Squarespace. So Square, please forgive me. You have a great slogan, but you know what I mean. It's like the reason why you're doing the things that you do is because you have this passion and you want to share it with so many people. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's difficult because it's again it's an industry that a lot of people want to be involved in, but it's like this thing that you hold on to, and whenever you get the chance you just want to share it to as many people as possible.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I like that you touched on this whole thing about like individuality because I think a lot of people, in all industries, and I think in college especially, we see a lot of this. There are a lot of people who I think struggle with their individuality complex and comparing themselves to others and like, comparing their skills to what other people have. And I think it's very important to remember that we all like every single person that is alive and exists and has existed has played their own unique role in on this planet in this universe. Like there's nobody who can take away that from you. You know what I mean? Like you are you, I am me. And there is no like clear path, you know what I mean? So I think the fact that you are able to I don't know, to be able to do computer science, but also be able to balance that with your curiosity and your love for connecting with people. Like I think that that is something that is super unique to you. You know what I mean? Just like how for me, I think the fact that I am able to you know experience the world through art and music and be able to share that and convey that through like in a tangible way. Like you can that wall I painted, that wall I painted, this wall I write songs every day. It's my emotions are tangible. I'm able to express them so well in that way, and that is something that is unique to me. So I think that's something really cool that I think a lot of people I wish a lot of people would a lot more people I wish a lot more people would respect that about themselves and would honor that within themselves, because that's it's a pretty incredible thing about having consciousness in the way that human beings have, you know.
I before I do want to talk I mention a little bit about your parents, but not too much. But I before we go to that route, I do want to ask you, and this is a question I didn't send on the sheet, but it's a question I do ask people. It's one of the most difficult questions I've asked people. Now,
Mm.
in large part because I can't answer this question, but so I'm gonna rely on other people to answer this question. Given that music and creativity, that's these given that this is such an important part of you, if someone were to take that away from you, this is kind of philosophical, so
Mm.
which is such it's such a weird thing because I say it's not a philosophical podcast, but lately I'm like maybe this is kind of philosophical.
And
But
that's amazing.
if
That's
if
really
someone were to take creativity, music, artistry, if they were to take that part of your identity, what would you lose? Because you don't just lose that thing. There's something, obviously, like you said, it means so much to you that you don't just lose that passion, you lose something that's more meaningful, if that makes sense.
Mm. So it's really interesting that you touch on this because this is something I've been reflecting on a lot. Um, First of all, I guess like we're talking about hypotheticals here because realistically, I can't imagine a way in which my creativity could be removed because that's, you can take away my hand, so I can't paint and I can't play guitar. And you can take away my vocal cords, so I can't sing. You know what I mean? Those are things that I can imagine. But to take away my creativity is to take away such a big aspect of who I am. But it's interesting because I feel like if I didn't have those things, then I don't know. I think maybe my existence would be a little bit more peaceful, and I'll explain why. I think that I think that like when you have something that you are so passionate about and that is your entire world, you begin to base your worthiness off of how good you are at that thing or how well you're doing your job or how efficient you're being and all, all of those things. It's like your worth is directly tied to your passion. So maybe if I didn't have that creativity, maybe if I wasn't so hard on myself to constantly reinvent the way that I'm sharing my art with the world, maybe I would just let myself be. And so I think that there's something really beautiful about that, like maybe I would just be, instead of being Pierangela and this artist and trying to do all these things and trying to get a record deal, all these things, I would just be Piera and I would just let myself exist. And maybe that would be beautiful too. You know what I mean? Because I think ultimately something that I think we forget, especially as young professionals, which we are, is that, and growing up in America, I'm not sure, did you grow up in America?
Yeah, so yeah, my parents were born in Bangladesh, but I was born in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Just wanted to clarify. But I think that as young professionals, especially growing up in a country that is, rooted in capitalism, we are taught to be independent. We are taught to work hard, and a lot of us base our worth off of, how good we are at what we do. But the fact that we're alive is a miracle. Every day that we exist is a blessing because there are a million ways to die every day and somehow we are still here and we're able to have this conversation. That is a miracle, you know? And I think that understanding that should give us more of an incentive to allow ourselves to simply exist without, having to think about how we contribute to the world all the time. Sometimes we can just be doing nothing, and that is enough. So I think that if I didn't have my creativity, I think that I would just be Piera, and I think that's also pretty cool. So that is my answer to that question, I think.
That's a really interesting question. And I know like a lot of people, and I guess like I could throw this in like the positive bin in the sense where it's like you could still be you. And I remember having this discussion with a friend of mine, and I said, if I quit this podcast, I wouldn't mind it. Like because there
Mhm.
is a lot of like when you are involved in the things that you're involved in, you want to be the best, you want to make sure everything looks good. But then when you take that away, it's like I don't have to worry about that anymore. But then I'm like, but do I really want to take another accounting class? No, I don't. I want to go back into podcasting. So I totally get where you're coming from. And that's such a really unique answer because a lot of people will say, oh, if I lose this, I lose that. Like this is what I'm missing out on. But you're in a way it's really interesting because it's like I can be me. And it's not a bad thing. It's just that maybe there's like because maybe the things that come with the things that you're involved in, you don't have to worry about it because you're not in it. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's a hypothetical one. So I hope that never happens because you are very talented at what you do. You're
Thank
very
you.
because you can. I'm looking at your background. I mean, that looks incredible. So yeah, keep on doing what you're doing. Um, I want to now transition a little bit. Not I don't want to talk too much about your family because that's obviously personal. But I do want to know because, like you said, that you're when you told your dad that about being involved with music, it was something that he didn't understand. And you said that how your dad's an engineer, and I think your mom is involved in marketing.
Yep.
And when you're so now, obviously, there's no doubt that you're the first in your family to pursue this music journey career. Tell me what that relationship is like. And the reason why I want to know this is that in different cultures, there's different ways, like different, some cultures have expectations for what field to pursue. So, as someone who comes from a South Asian background, there is the common thing where it's like in not India, sorry. My parents are from Bangladesh, but we're close to India, which is that like lawyer, doctor, engineer, anything else, and it's like, oh boy, here we like this is not good. You're not gonna make money. You're not gonna be successful, and it's like, and it almost feels like in a weird way this is like, I always joke like if anyone who's able to pursue anything but medical, engineering, or lawyer, if you're able to convince your parents that you don't want to pursue this and you get to pursue what you want, you should win the Nobel Peace Prize, because that is difficult, like convincing your parents or maybe their friends that like you're pursuing anything but the common traditional routes. So for you, and I don't know much about Venezuelan culture or Hispanic culture, so what was that relationship like? Because you're obviously now the first in your family, you're pursuing this journey, but I'm pretty sure your family and you can agree that like you want to make sure you develop that relationship, that when you pursue things that you want to pursue, you're not trying to stay away from them. It's more so that you want to write your story and figure out your purpose in making the world a better place, like how you mentioned in the beginning.
Well, okay, so it's really interesting. I want to touch on the fact that you said, like, for example, in your culture, you have to be a doctor, or like an engineer, something that's more, a more left-brained field. And I think that, like I think that a common theme here with family that comes from shame. That comes from the shame of feeling like, oh, like, your parents or, like they want you to succeed, because maybe they didn't have the same opportunities that you have now in this country that, than they had in their country. You get what I'm saying? And that comes from a scarcity mindset in a sense. And I think that a lot of families have that in the sense of like they want their children to succeed. They want their children to have more opportunities than they had. At least that's how I feel with my family. For example, my parents, they came to Miami to have a better future. My dad came here with a dream. And it's interesting because I feel like my parents, like, although I've experienced aspects of that in different ways, as anybody does with their families, my parents always believed in me. And it's funny because my parents were pretty strict about a lot of things. But when it came to me figuring out who I was and me figuring out what I wanted to do in this world, they gave me all the freedom in the world to explore that. And I think that that's really beautiful, because I think they could have definitely come here and had a different mindset and said, okay, well, Piera needs to become a doctor because she needs to come and make money, and she needs to, come here and do what we couldn't, because my parents, like my dad had big dreams of starting a business, and his business that didn't work out. And so I think that that kind of shifted his perspective. Instead of being so money oriented, it was more so let them follow that. Like my parents want their kids to follow their dreams. Like me and my brother, like my brother, he's about to graduate high school. He started his first day of senior year, and he wants to study abroad. He wants to go to Italy. Lord knows what he wants to do there, but that's for him to figure out, and we all respect it because I don't know, like it's you know what I mean? Like if as long as you're doing something authentically, you can figure it out, but you have to honor your truth. And I think that's always been the motto in my family. So my parents have been more than supportive, even though they didn't know how to, like, emotionally supportive, because and when it came to like actually getting things done and finding opportunities, that was all me, but they were like, well, we don't know how to help you, but we believe in you. And so I was very lucky in that regard because not a lot of people have that.
For sure. And the interesting thing about computer science was that I was very hesitant to do it. But my dad was involved in computer science. So it was like, you can do this and I can help you. And while I was hesitant at first, like it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm gonna do it. But then as I got ready to go to college, I was like, do I really want to do this? And then once I was able to like dip in the pond or dip my toes in the water, and I hope that's the analogy. Yeah, it is the analogy. And then like started figuring it out on my own. I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe this is interesting, because computer science is a broad term. Similar like how people say engineering. Like, well, what type of engineering? Computer science, there's different types of programming languages and different types of purposes. So once I found the one that fit me, I was like, oh, okay, now I know what I want to do. So yeah, but unfortunately, I have quite a few friends that will tell me like they are doing the things that they're doing because their parents are telling them to do it. And it's one of those things where it's like, I always wonder, like, how do you balance that? Because I feel like any form of disagreement could result in chaos. And I think it goes back to, like you said, that, and it's not just in Venezuelan or in South Asian cultures. I'm sure in multiple cultures, many cultures, where it's like they're not trying to be the villain in your story. It's more like because they've probably done the same thing that you're currently trying to do, and they don't want bad things happening to you.
I think they have lived longer. And I think this is something that most people can relate to. Your parents have lived longer. They've been your age before, and they really want what's best for you based on the knowledge that they have. But it makes me sad to see people. It's like, as much as, parents might push back on what you really want to do, the truth is that you are going to succeed more doing something that you're genuinely passionate about than following something that you're not passionate about in an attempt to please those around you. You know what I mean? Like, I think that that is the thing, but I don't think that goes to say that, our parents, like, it really comes from a place of so much love, and they don't even know that they are, being harmful by forcing us into certain, but really, like, I think by the time you get to a certain age, I think that, like, it's all about, how much ownership you want to take in your life. And that's a level of accountability that you either decide to take, or you just decide to go with the flow of things and do whatever's easiest for those around you. You know what I mean? And that's a very individual journey, but it does come from love. And I think that, I think about this a lot, thinking about if I ever want to be a parent someday, and how my perspectives and my outlook on the world would affect my children. And it's just like, you just won't know until you get there. You can't empathize. You won't really be able to empathize. You can sympathize, but you won't be able to empathize until you're in that position and watching your child go into the world and follow a field that maybe doesn't have like a certain, solid stream of income, and then stressing out for them. But everybody has their own path. You know what I mean?
For sure. And that's interestingly enough, another question that I did not send on the sheet, but because you said that, we were talking about the idea of family and the importance of love and support. I do want to transition into this because we both have incredible parents, although I haven't met them, but I'm sure they're great. Um, shout out to your parents. But
I have opinions.
I want to talk to you about this because you are very passionate about identity and you do the things based on, you're celebrating your cultures, your background, the fact that you don't, in politics, we say, for example, like we say this, I see this a lot in like, this is not a political podcast and I don't really care about your political beliefs, but it's like the term Republican in name only, where it's like, oh, you're only Republican because that's your title, but you don't do anything to show that. Now, again, that's not a political podcast, but like I think you know where I'm gonna go with me with this. So the sense of like when it comes to like whether it's your Hispanic identity or more specifically your Venezuelan, you're not, one of the things that's really important to you is that you want to cherish that because that's what makes you you. And at a time where we're growing up in the United States, where we're surrounded by people who are different from us, it's very easy to almost forget where we come from or our identity part because it's like we're growing up with people who are different from us, and we think that the best way to fit in is to forget where we come from and focus on what is being presented in front of us. I want to ask you this. It's I've asked this question once and I'd love to bring these conversations back, especially to those who really emphasize the importance of identity. What would you say has prevented you from only being seen as something in name only? Because you're growing up in the United States. There are obviously people who are maybe different from you for the most part. It's very easy to forget where you come from, but you make it a priority to make sure that whatever you do things based on you give tribute to your culture, your background, the way you grew up. It's not just like, oh yeah, I'm Venezuelan and then that's it, but you obviously celebrate that and you make sure that's such an important part of you.
Well, I think so. Just to be clear, your question is, how do I make sure to not lose, like, my background within my current identity?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting. I feel like it's very important to me to constantly give homage to where I'm from. And so it's not necessarily that, I mean, I am Venezuelan and that is a very important part of who I am. But I think like really something I like to put a lot of emphasis on is the fact that I got to grow up in Miami Beach, which is very rare. Like even in Miami, being born and raised in Miami Beach is rare because Miami Beach is very touristic. So the fact that I have had the privilege of growing up around all different types of cultures, and also, like my dad is Hungarian, he was raised in Venezuela, my mom is Italian and Venezuelan. Like I'm very multicultural, and that is something that I think stepping out of Miami, it made me realize, like, wow, not everybody has that. That's really like cool that I get to have so much perspective. I grew up traveling a lot, a lot of those things. Like it's very important to me because it's molded my perspectives on the world and who I am. So I think it's really important to kind of like pay tribute to that within my artist identity. And I think the main way I do that is through the way that I dress, which isn't necessarily like, I mean, I feel like the way that we dress, and especially as artists, like it is definitely a statement. You know what I mean? So for me, like I love to constantly be wearing color. Like I notice sometimes, like when I'm sad, like I wear black without even realizing it. But I don't like wearing black. It's like I thrive in color. So that is one big thing. Or like the jewelry that I wear is all very symbolic to my like beliefs. And I think that it's all just like everything, everything, the music that I listen to, the things that I write, the things that I post, all of it has little Easter eggs about who I am. Even the people that I choose to spend time with, you know what I mean? And the people that I choose to take the time to explain my own views to, it's all kind of connected to, my, like it's all paying homage to where I've come from. And so the way that I honor that is by continuing to, I don't know, yeah, like I guess in the way that I dress, the things that I post, the conversations that I try to bring up with the people around me, but also making sure to spend time with people who come from, similar backgrounds. And also something that's important for me, especially, going to school in Boston, which is like, let me tell you, Miami is like a completely different like thing. Like from the rest of the US is completely different. Like Miami is like Latin America connected to the US. Like it's crazy. Like everybody here speaks Spanish, bro. Like it's like everybody treats each other like family. Like the dynamic is and I know that the South kind of has that too. And every part of the US is different, but generally speaking, it's very, very different. So I think going to Boston and meeting people who had like who don't even have a passport, who haven't left the country, who only speak one language, whose parents are also from the US and maybe have never left the town that they grew up in, like I think it's really cool to be able to share my perspectives and my stories with them and hear their stories as well, because I think it helps us learn more about each other and kind of open up our minds to things that maybe we didn't realize beforehand. So I don't know. I think like connecting with people too, because the conversations that we have with others and like as artists, like it definitely inspires, the things that we go and write about or the things that we paint about. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think there's it's like it's just a daily intention I set to make sure that everything that I do honors where I came from, through different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a great. Yeah, I know that's a complicated question, but I really love the way you answered it. So yeah, I overthink a lot. So thank you for sticking with me. Um,
Me too.
that's actually how and before I let you go, I have a couple of questions, but that's actually how I want to go transition to the next conversation, which is, the thing is that you are obviously someone who's very like you emphasize the importance of authenticity in the work that you do, and we have freedom to do what we want. It's not like no one forced you to be like, hey, listen, you're gonna be a musician or else X, Y, and Z. I don't know. I'm really bad at like scaring people, but like you get what I'm trying to say. It's like you're gonna do this or else no. Like you obviously wanted to do this and you're pursuing it. However, in like the creativity space, and I'm gonna include podcasting as well, it's so difficult like balancing being free, like being ourselves, as well as over like as well as avoiding the idea of overthinking. So on podcasting, I like to ask like really a lot of interesting questions. Sometimes I will overthink to the point where like I don't make sense. And I want to ask, like I overthink because I truly care, like, and I really want to have these thought-provoking questions or conversations. So as from a musician's perspective, describe that journey of being free and being authentic while also avoiding or possibly dealing with the idea of overthinking, because these two can exist, and the relationship that each person has with these two things can be different from person to person.
Yeah, so I love this question because I am a huge overthinker and I struggle with a lot of anxiety, and I have throughout my entire life. And I think that my biggest goal as a musician is to be able, like, really what I want to do with my music is inspire people to towards self-acceptance and to kind of glamorize true self-acceptance, not like I feel like there's a very like surface level aspect of self-acceptance that we see on social media, but the truth is that self-acceptance is like truly looking at yourself, flaws and all, internally, externally, all of it, and just being like, okay, well, maybe there are things about myself that I wish I can change, but I accept that this is who I am. And in fact, they aren't setbacks. I don't have setbacks. I have differences. You know what I mean? Differences to other people. This doesn't mean that there's any, like, I was just talking about this the other day, but it's like, for example, my anxiety is something that sometimes is like totally debilitating, you know what I mean? But instead of viewing that as something that is a shortcoming, it's just a different thing that gives me a different perspective. And if anything, that can be turned into a superpower. But if I do the work to accept myself first, then I can work towards viewing that as a way in which I can empower myself even more. So it all starts from there. And I'm currently on this journey of trying to go even deeper with my self acceptance because it's hard, especially being in college. You know, you feel like there are certain ways in which you have to follow the grain or kind of like, dim certain parts of yourself to kind of fit in a little bit more. For me, especially because I grew up in a culture that is completely different from what I see in Boston, you know, and I think that it is really hard for me to fit in amongst some of my peers sometimes. And I feel like maybe I should be a little bit less honest about who I am, and maybe I should be a little bit more quiet about the things that I believe in, simply because I don't want to make anybody else uncomfortable. But I think that if that's how we live and we limit ourselves, and really, like, I don't know, nobody wins in that situation. Even things that are uncomfortable for people to hear will stay in their heads and they'll think about it. And eventually they might never admit it to you, but they'll reflect on it and they'll get something out of it. So I think that the way I kind of handle the overthinking and the anxiety and the rough moments of just being a person, and how I choose to stay authentic, is by continuing to go deeper into those things. So it's like if I'm an overthinker, like, okay, let's be an overthinker and let that be the identity of the month. And if I'm going to be an overthinker, then I'm fully going to be an overthinker. I'm going to write music about it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to post about it. I'm going to, open up conversations to show other overthinkers like, hey, like, you're not alone. And I don't know. I think for me, especially as an artist, because this work is very vulnerable and it deals with me putting my true emotions out into the world for other people to empathize with, like, if I'm feeling something difficult, I think my ultimate goal is to be able to speak about it openly and from a place of love instead of a place of shame. But that's a lifelong journey, and I'm very much on the beginning of that journey. And I think that I've been on the beginning of that journey for a long time. So it's like the progress is slow, but the intention is to always be as open as possible.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's a journey, and I don't know if we'll ever get to like ever being perfect, because there's always a sense of like leveling up. It's constantly just figuring out like, okay, what are some things I'm struggling with? Okay, how do I overcome this? And then what's my next set of obstacles and how do I overcome that? So it's a consistent journey, and yeah, everyone's journey is different, but at the same time, regardless of how much success or how much how much you've done, there's always more to grow from a professional and personal level.
Yeah.
Um, I was just gonna say, what was my next question? Oh, now I remember. So talking about all the things that you've experienced, like you said, overthinking, anxiety, and then growing up and pursuing a field where there's so many people that are pursuing it. I think I've had people say, like, one of the questions that another question I've asked is, like the idea of proving yourself or proving other people wrong, because that's something that we face quite a bit. And I've had guests in the past talk about how their biggest enemy is themselves. But then I've also had people say that because of how people treated them, that it's like, I'm going to show you that that was a mistake. So from your perspective, and I'm not saying one is right or wrong, I just love to know from your perspective, and the idea of proving someone wrong or proving yourself right, which one do you best align with and why?
Well, I think at the very start of my choice to fully devote myself to art, after like elementary school, when I had that, like, that teacher in elementary school telling me that I couldn't be in the arts, like that really did something to me. And I think for several years, I think my intention was to prove her wrong. But I realized that it's kind of like my purpose is so much deeper than anything that, like, and not saying my, I think like genuinely like art is just, it's so much, it's just, it's so much more important than proving somebody wrong or proving myself wrong or anything, or proving myself right. It's not about me or anything I've experienced or really any specific person. I have a goal to share a message, hopefully with the world. And if I can make a positive impact, I don't matter. It's because, and I'm going to explain this. I have noticed. So sometimes I'm at the sites where I've painted a mural. And I remember the first time I realized this, I had painted a mural for Art Basel, which is a really big, like, it's like the biggest art selling event in the world, and it happens in Miami. So I painted a mural at this hotel in like South Beach, which is a very touristic area. And I remember that I went in to have lunch with somebody at that hotel after I had finished the mural, and I would see people like walk by my mural, and they would like stand and they'd look at it and they'd be talking about like, oh, like what does it mean, and like all these things, and then drawing conclusions to what they thought it meant or what it made them feel. And I was sitting right there and they didn't know that I was the artist. And it's so cool because it's like when people look at my art, they're not thinking about me, they're thinking about what it makes them feel. You know what I mean? So it's like I think there came a certain point where I started to realize like I don't need to prove that teacher wrong. It doesn't matter. It's not about that. It is so much deeper than that. For me, success is not so much like, oh, like how successful can I show people that I am? It's not about that anymore. It's not about even like how loved can I be by the world? How respected can I be? Those things do not matter to me because I feel like what I'm trying to do supersedes me. And that is, I think, like, while, you know, obviously as humans we have ego, and I think ego is a really important thing that some people try to antagonize, but really no, ego is what drives us to keep going. You know what I mean? So obviously, you know, my ego, in some ways I want to prove to myself that I'm capable of doing big things and that I'm capable of fulfilling the expectations that I've set for myself, you know. But at the same time, like, really the ultimate goal has nothing to do with me. As long as people are inspired and as long as I make a difference, like, that is really like the goal. So I really don't think that, you know, the whole question of who am I trying to prove wrong or right or any of those things, like, that doesn't, I don't think that really like matters to me at this point. The thing that does matter to me is, can I will I be able to overcome my perfectionism, my feelings of inadequacy, my imposter syndrome in order to get my job done? You know what I mean? Can I get over myself in order for me to do the authentic work that I want to do? You know what I mean? Because sometimes I think, like, as artists, it's very easy for us to, you know, constantly be looking at ourselves and trying to fix, you know, our delivery of our message and our art and criticize the art and just be very self-centered in that way, which is completely natural. You know what I mean? But I really try to remember the bigger like purpose, because I do tend to get lost in that. And that's not, I don't want to just be looking at myself all the time because it's not about me, you know? So that's, yeah, that's my answer to that.
Yeah, it's like it's not you, it's something bigger than you at the end of the day, and you're doing it for a much bigger purpose. So yeah, that's really interesting, and I really like the way you say that. And I think by doing that, there's a sense of peace and knowing that it no longer has to be a personal thing because you're past that. You're trying to be a part of a much of you're trying to be a part of something bigger and create more meaningful change rather than just this little like personal battle between you and whoever proved you wrong. So that was really great. And what's interesting is I feel like you answered so many of my other questions because I was going to
Oh,
say like I was going to be like how do you define success, and then you're like you just defined it. So wow, like now I'm kind of
you
overthinking.
know, I think in regards to answer that question, you know, because I feel like that's one part of it. But I think, you know, let's be real, I'm still a person. I still have like needs outside of, you know, fulfilling, you know, like my life's purpose. It's like my life's purpose is so big and I try to take on so much, but really my definition of success as a human being, I think, is I want to I want to be able to feel peace because, like I said, I struggle with a lot of anxiety that comes from shame of not being enough. or maybe like something's wrong with me, or maybe I'm doing this wrong or that. I want to be able to feel at peace with myself. I want to be able to like fully accept myself. And I want to be in a place where I can just like stand still without feeling like I need to do more. I want to feel like I am worthy without having to do anything to prove that I'm worthy. Do you get what I mean? And those are all things that I'm currently like working on now. And of course, I want to be able to, success to me also means that I do want to be able to share my music on a global scale, which is it's a very big dream to have, and something that realistically, if we think realistically, that doesn't happen for a lot of people. You know what I mean? So maybe the dream might change. We don't know where life is going to take me, but I think it's kind of like, I do want to do that. And do I believe that I can? Yes, I do. I don't feel limited by anything, because I think that the moment that I start to put limits on what I'm capable of doing, that is when I start to get farther and farther from the dream. But at this point, yes, I want to share my music on a global scale, because I do want to see positive change in the world. And there's so much that I want to say, and so much that I've learned from those around me that I want to share with others. So that is part of what success means to me. I want to be able to, support myself financially off of my passion without having to do a meaningless job that I don't want to do. You know what I mean? I want to devote my life to this. And I want to be able to just, I want to be able to do that. Like if I can find a way to support myself through my passion, through love, like that is the most beautiful thing. That is success to me. And constantly, obviously something else that's really important is to surround myself with people who inspire me to be better, people who I think are talented, who push me to grow, people who love me. Those things are super important to me too. So I think, success, like I think there's a lot of things that come into that, and into what success means to me. But yeah, generally that's what success is for me, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a journey, and I'm sure that even though you obviously are very passionate and you're very good at the things that you do, I'm sure there's going to be challenges along the way, but like you said, like you believe in yourself, and I'm sure that regardless of what challenges comes your way, you're going to do really great. And yeah, who wants to see Pierangela doing accounting? No, I'm just kidding. Actually, that might not be a bad idea. That might not be a bad idea. I
Makes
don't
sense. It just
want.
didn't make sense.
No, I'm kidding. To any accounting majors, congratulations on everything that you do.
Shout out to y'all. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I can't.
I'm glad I'm done taking these classes, but nevertheless, Pierangela, your journey with music, culture, and what you want to do with your passion for creativity is really special. So I just want to say, continue doing the great work. You are obviously, like I said, I don't know, I've said this so many times, but obviously your art is really incredible. So I hope that you continue to pursue. Hope you continue to pursue music and art. You're great at both of them, and continue to inspire the world. So, Pierangela, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness. I wish you the best of luck with school, with your creativity talent, and I hope we get to meet in person someday.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much, Hamza, for reaching out and for, shining a light on the things that I wanted to share. I really appreciate you for choosing me for this opportunity, and I just want to say that the work that you're doing is so incredible. You're shining a light on the incredible lives of so many people of our generation who are trying to make a difference in this world, and I think that's really special. I'm excited to see where you're going to go, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. So, thank you so much for this opportunity. This was amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.